L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. So 32 years ago, we all know, some of us remember it vividly with our own eyes. Some have seen the video many times. The Rebbe's heartfelt and heart-wrenching words, just a few lines which carry such import and potency about the Rebbe doing everything he could, doesn't know what more he can do except give it over to us to bring the Geula Shiach. Okay, now we're talking. Good. These words have been pored over and discussed and argued about now for over 3 decades, generations. The bottom line is, the Rebbe was speaking to us right now in Tafshin Pei Gimel. 32 years later, would he be saying the same thing? So, Bapashtas, yes. Because by the Rebbe, Geula was not just Beruchnius spiritually, and not just that potentially, but by the Rebbe, it was Geula Mitis V'Shleim B'Pel Mamish, the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, and everything that constitutes, according to Halacha and according to Chassidus, Gilui Ein Sof in this world. So, any of us who are going to be candid and honest, if the Rebbe would say the same words 32 years later, I mean, what does that mean about us? Have we done anything? I'm sure everybody here, everybody listening, anybody who the Rebbe means something important to them, definitely cares about what the Rebbe said. And I think the first thing an honest person has to do, especially a chassid, is honest din v'cheshbon, accountability. Were you ready to be stand before the Rebbe right now and give a duch, a din v'cheshbon, and say, okay, here's, Rebbe, what we did for the last 32 years. So now the time for the Geula to come. Now we all know, and I should qualify this right out at the outset, that the Eibishter is a Bal Rachamim, and the Rebbe is a Bal Rachamim, and they could have compassion and mercy on us and just bring the Geula without any effort on our part. But the Rebbe was clearly adamant and made it clear time and again, as much as people begged the Rebbe after Chav Ches Nissan, that I'm telling you, this is now what you need to do. Everyone knows the words that the Rebbe said to that woman the Sunday after Chav Ches Nissan. A woman who clearly was crying from her heart. It wasn't a put on. She clearly had lost a child, as she says to the Rebbe, you leave us hanging here, telling us we have to do it. You, Rebbe, you have to do it. And with the Rebbe, with all the rachmanas that he would have on anyone, especially a woman in that situation, still, Rebbe said, if I'm the Rebbe, then I'm telling you what you have to do. And he pointed to everyone twice. Video is out, you could see it. That always struck me because we know to what extent the Rebbe went to treat every person with sensitivity. And here, you have to say it was so critical that we have to do something that even here the Rebbe would not give 1 inch, so to speak. And says to the woman, no, this is what you have to do and you have to do. So, I don't know if anybody's ready to volunteer to stand before the Rebbe right now and give a duch and say, okay, here's what we did. We fulfilled what you said. I, for one, can say this. I'm not ready to volunteer. Maybe Rabbi Garelick has the chutzpah. I'm not going to hide from the Rebbe, but I'm not ready to volunteer. Because the fact is the results are more or less the same. Now, we know every second closer is closer to the Geula. So there's no question 32 years have passed, we're closer. But the finish line has not been reached. And the Rebbe said, Lehevel Larik applies right now as well. So the point I want to make here is this. There's not a question on the Rebbe. I'm not worried about the Rebbe. I'm not about the Rebbe's words, the Rebbe can sich beistein, when he said that I did everything and everything is lehavalarik. Even that doesn't disturb. I'll tell you why in a moment. I'm worried about us, frankly, because they say insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if we're going to be honest with ourselves, what are we going to do different this year, Chav Chesed? I've already been Farbrengen now 32 times on Chav Chesed. Every year I'm asked to Farbrengen somewhere or other. And obviously we never give up. We have to do, that's what we're charged to do. But I have to say that unless there's a hazazah, some type of shift. Again, l'milmaila, what the Eibishter does, it could be just right now sitting here, ma'aseh echad, one action. We tip the scales. We all know what the Rambam says. That's obvious. But we're talking about what we should be doing. Tomorrow's a full day. Next day is another day. How are we filling our time? So I haven't seen many people lose sleep over the fact that Mashiach hasn't come. That could be a mila also, because as much as the Rebbe made it such a sense of urgency, he also didn't make us crazy, with maybe a few exceptions. In other words, we live our lives. Like I remember Time magazine wrote an article back in Tafshin Nun Aleph, I think it was, about the Rebbe's and Lubavitch's work in bringing Mashiach and the urgency and the passion. It was a very positive, very, very positive article. At the end, the last line of the article, I'll never forget. And despite all Chabad's passions about Mashiach and their commitment and their urgency, no Lubavitchers have changed their summer plans. That's what they wrote. So I remember reading it and thinking to myself, is that L'mal Yusa or L'gar Yusa? L'mal Yusa could be because with all the commitment and all the urgency that the Rebbe said, Al Pi Hashem Yisu, Al Pi Hashem Yachnu, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, at the same time the Rebbe said not just to rent homes and buildings, but to build. Mashiach can come any second, so are we building shuls and Batei Chabad all over the world? Because right now, Al Pi Hashem Yah, this is where we are. We have to do everything possible right now like a pnimi. And then, yes, a second later, Mashiach can come. The Rebbe said many a time, Nimnam Nimnoyes. It's not a pella. There could be two opposites at once. So you could say that's the Mila, as much as the Rebbe was pushing Mashiach Geula, but he didn't turn people into nuts in the sense where, yep, there's still summer plans, so to speak. You still have to plan accordingly. You could also say, Likadiyusa, like the Rebbe would say often, when you say, Ishtachas Gafne, Ishtachas Teinose, this one's sitting under his vineyard, and this one by his fig tree. So on one hand, it's a simon of menucha and bracha and shalom, that everyone's at peace. It also can mean complacency. Everyone's very calm and relaxed, and no one's changing their summer plans. But bottom line, command over le'amrinan. So I don't know if we can get ourselves to lose sleep. Maybe we can lose sleep over the fact that the Rebbe lost sleep. Maybe. Maybe some Chassidus can bring themselves to that. So I don't know if that's the goal of a Farbrengen like this on Chav Ches Nissan. The goal is what the Rebbe always emphasized, action b'peil. You know, much has been said in explaining these sichos, what the Rebbe meant exactly. And it's very clear that Rebbe Chas v'Sholem was not abrogating, or not in a way, God forbid, saying that I finished my job. He's saying, I did everything I can do. What else do you Rebbe want? You have Farbrengens, they're going from Tafshin Yud all the way to Tafshin Nun Aleph and Nun Beis. So the Rebbe said he's going to say another Rambam and another Sicha, another Mitzvah Shreibim and printing. So how much more do you want me to say? More Chidush Teira. There's something has to move the needle. And if you know, we all know Purim Tafshim Mem Zayin, the Rebbe basically said 4 years before Chav Ches Nissan, he already said the Teichen, that it went from Hanasi to Hakel. I don't want to go through a whole arichas and understanding that, especially not in Haskalah. The bottom line is the punchline. So I've shared this, I believe, and I want to share it now again because I think it's extremely relevant. And that is being someone who's a chayzer, a maniach, so I was zeicha to write and to remember and to write many of the sichos, especially those years. But for a good period of time, from Tafshil Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches, when I got involved. So Shabbos Parsha Ba'aleischa Tovshin Nun Aleph, which would be Le'esata, the last time the Rebbe would Farbrengen on Ba'aleischa. So Ba'aleischa was one of the central themes that the Rebbe always emphasized, which is essentially the theme of Chav Ches Nissan too. Ba'aleischa, why does it say Ba'aleischa? So Rashi says, not Ba'ad L'keischa, because Ad Shetei Shalevas Eila Me'eleha. So Ad L'keischa means to ignite, to light the candles, to kindle them. So why does it say to raise the flames? You don't raise flames, you light them. So Rashi says, because the Kohen Gadol was told that he had to wait that extra second to make sure the flame rises on its own. You know, it takes a second to catch. So the Rebbe asked the question, what would happen if it burned out? He'd come back and light it again. For that, you have to change a whole word in the Torah. Why is it so significant? The Rebbe said, because lighting the candles represents Kolos Avedis Hashem, to light the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam in every person, the flame, which is our soul, to Ner Mitzvah V'Teira Er. So it's all about lighting flames. Chinuch, inspiration, every time we influence someone, it's in a way we're lighting their flame. They have a flame inside them, and we need to fan those flames. We need to ignite them. So the Torah is telling us that when you mechanech someone, or you educate, inspire someone, it's not enough just to inspire them. You have to make sure that they retain that inspiration. There's a pool nimshaches, shalevas elam elah, that even when you're not there, when the teacher is not there, when the mashpia is not there, the student, himidu, talmidim harba, that he can stand on his own feet. In other words, basically, we don't just teach knowledge, data, and information. You teach methodology, how to think, not just what to think. Very big difference. So one word teaches us how to mashpia someone efem primi. Even when you're not there, they are influenced forever. I mean, just look at the Dugma Chai right here. It's 32 years from Chav Ches Nissan. It's 29 years from Gimel Tammuz. Here's a whole generation of people who never saw the Rebbe Begashmias, I assume. And yet, we're here by Farbrengens. Chabad is thriving all over the world. What do you need a better example of Shalev Selam Elah? But, okay. Then the Rebbe went into a whole discussion in the Sikha, Kedarke Bakedish, the Rebbe's style, of analyzing what does this mean. Is it really Me'eleha? Is the flame really burning on its own? Because at the end of the day, it wouldn't be lit had the Kohen Gadol not light it. It's not burning on its own. Someone lit it. Now it's burning on its own. And the Rebbe went back and forth about the concept of Bechira. When Hashem gives us free will, is it truly free will? Or Hashem gave us the free will, so is it really free? And it was a very dakistic, very subtle and complex sikha. So since we had the opportunity, when we prepared the sikha, we would ask questions. So I remember sending in a good page and a half of questions. Because I saw it was a very Yesedidik and Akudah. The Rebbe didn't always speak about it in this fashion. So I put a whole bunch of questions to clarify the points. And always, the Rebbe would always answer the questions we asked. Because it wasn't just for us personally, it was for publication, to make clear the points for posterity. This is the only time that Rebbe answered the following. He wrote on the side of the page, instead of answering it was an answer, but the way that Rebbe answered was like this. He says, Kol Neseis Fathers, the entire theme of the Farbrengen is Shalev Selam Elah, and you're asking me to answer your questions. I remember when I saw that answer, it was a very interesting answer. But frankly, we didn't want our answer, we wanted the Rebbe's answer. But that's what the Rebbe wrote. It's the only time he ever wrote that. I remember I asked Rabbi, I asked other manichim from all previous years. No one ever got such an answer. After Chav Zayin Adar and Gimel Tammuz, I think it became clear maybe why the Rebbe answered that way then, and didn't answer that way in other questions we asked. Maybe it was Beremez, in a sense, what was coming. Exactly what he said, Chav Ches Nissan. That I'm giving you the kayach, it should be me'elah. It's not really you, completely you. When the Kohen Gadol lights the flame, yes, he's lighting it, but he's making it in a way that it becomes also yours. Like the Rebbe writes in one sikha, that the Rebbe could have accomplished everything on his own. He could have brought Mashiach without us. But he gave us the schus to be a shutiv with him. Shutiv l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Maaseh Bereishis. He's giving us the kayach. The Rebbe wasn't saying, I'm giving you now, I'm working through you. The Rebbe once answered to an asken Someone asked the Rebbe a question. The Rebbe said you should go to Katzas Yedidim Avinim. You should go ask the advice of friends, experts. One of the common answers the Rebbe gave, one of the most common answers, and I should tell you, I should just mention, it's one of the answers that most people don't follow. People go to either friends or to experts, but not friends that are experts. Check it out, you'll see. So the guy writes back to the Rebbe, he wants the Rebbe's answer. What are you sending him to Yedidim Avinim? He wants the Rebbe's answer. So the Rebbe responded, Was ardir as ich will empfern durch Yedidim Avinim? Why do you mind that I'm going to answer to you through Yedidim Avinim? What do you think? I'm really sending you Yedidim Avinim. Sometimes the answer comes one way. Sometimes it comes through different shluchim, harbe shluchim l'mokim. So I can't say for sure, but my understanding was that the Rebbe was answering the question. And maybe it took years for us to figure out on our own that the Rebbe was answering that it's not on your own. I'm giving you the kayach, that it should be on your own. In other words, you have to do something on your end. That Rebbe wrote that. So you look through all the sikhs of the Rebbe, starting the first Farbrengen, after Basel Lagani, Tovshin Yud Aleph, we all know the Rebbe's words. Which literally means don't convince yourself birds in your bosom, which means don't delude yourself into thinking that I'm going to do the job for you, that now you appointed a son-in-law, I'll do the job, and you'll send me ksovim, and you'll sing me nigunim, and you write me notes. No. The Rebbe said everyone has their pekel, everyone has their shtus delumazeh. Says nicht zalven helfen. The Rebbe is not going to deprive from helping. But basically he said, I'll meet you halfway, help those that want ready to help themselves. So it's not a new chiddush in Chavches Nissan mitamol that Rebbe is saying this theme. He's always said it. It was just very dramatic and very pointed when the Rebbe said it regarding Mashiach in the Rebbe's words. But if you think about it, it was the yisod of Chalal yisod of Teirach Chassidus is Aveda B'Keach Atzmei Shalev Eselamei Eleha. So what is all this bottom line? It's not for drushes. It's the only person we can look at in this whole picture, even though we like to think we could blame God for everything. Some people like to blame the Rebbe for other things. I mean blame Chaz v'Shalom, you know what I mean? Basically, the only one we can look at is ourselves. It's exactly what the Rebbe said. Anything else is frankly either an excuse or a distraction. One of the tzedlach the Rebbe wrote after Chavches Nissan, he says, you're looking for reasons, excuses not to do what you have to do. So of course it's easy. Who am I? Mi ani, mo ani. The Rebbe didn't bring Mashiach. I'm going to bring Mashiach. That's the usual one. So what do you think? The Rebbe is saying that? He's saying, no, I did everything and I'm asking you for a little drop to help me here. I heard from Rabbi Avram Hecht. He told me that when he was a bacher, that the Frierdiker Rebbe sent him to go speak somewhere in a shul. So he said, I'm not a speaker. My brother, Shlomo Zalman Hecht in Chicago, Yankel Hecht, JJ, they're speakers. I'm nobody. Now, I don't think he thought he was nobody, but so the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, he said, Anova shalebim kema, you say dase gaiva. You hear that? Misplaced humility is rooted in arrogance. Because who decided? You decided you're nobody? The Eberster says yes. So the Rebbe is telling you, I want you to go speak. You're telling me that what? You're nobody? I'm telling you, you are somebody. I'm sitting near Harav Garelick. So we all know a letter that Rebbe wrote to his mother. He could verify it. I hope I'm not taking away what you're going to be saying. Okay. You said it last year? Okay, fine. So we can go back to the videotape. You know, like sometimes people tell me, I don't like what you said. I says, okay, so listen to my speech last year. Okay, maybe you'll like that one. You know, there's yeah. So Bekitzer, I heard it actually from your mother. Rabbi Garelick, for Shluches, together with Yvad L'chaim, Gershon Mendel, was sent to Tes in Italy. So the way I heard it, and then your mother sent me the letter, where she said she was starting, doing pu'ulas with women, and she was giving a shir in Tanya to women. Where is it? In Lugano, in Switzerland, which is closer to Italy by the border. And she had a special. It was a chashuv of women. She finally got in, and she's going to go give a shir. She prepared herself. She was all excited. In her words, like a good posner, always knocking herself, she said, it didn't work out exactly as I planned. And way back, she's already preparing her letter to the Rebbe that she's basically not Chad Rishon giving up on shlichus, but these pulis are not for her. And that's what she wrote to the Rebbe, that she's not made out for this. I don't know the exact words. But Kitsa, then she was mefasim the letter. The Rebbe writes in English a paragraph, and he says, I'm just paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact words. He says, about you, what you write to me, that you don't think you're worthy or you're capable or able to do your shlichus, and you'll just be a good wife or whatever, help your husband. So I assume that you're not trying to say what I don't think you want to say what this sounds like, that the one who sent you didn't know what he was doing, didn't know whom he sent. In other words, basically you're questioning me because I sent you. The Rebbe says it twice. So the fact that the Rebbe said each of us have the ability, that anyone who questions that, you're questioning the Rebbe himself. The Meraglim made that mistake. They were sent to figure out how to enter Eretz Yisrael. No one ever asked them whether they were entering Eretz Yisrael. It's not up to us to decide. That the Rebbe tells you it's our job. There's nothing to discuss after that. You have two choices. Either you're part of it, or you say it's not for me. That you have your bechira. But don't start finding excuses and the Rebbe doesn't know who I am or he's overestimating me and so on. That's not the case. So if that's the premise, the yesod, that the Rebbe is saying something, emes lamita, the same shechina medaberes meter greine that every chassid accepts, said that you and I and you, exactly as the Rebbe pointed to all of us, that means that we definitely can do something. So one question to Michov Chesnis, and then there's only one question. What have you done, and what are you going to do tomorrow? Not very complex. So, now obviously, if I'm going to say it, I have to speak about myself. And I have to say the following. I've done some things. I clearly have not done enough. Everyone has their own chushim. And I remember once Farbrengen about this, and someone says, well, you wrote Toward a Meaningful Life. You did a lot of good things. And if that didn't work, what am I going to do? I said, yeah, but the Rebbe told us all that we have to do. He didn't tell one person. Each one of you, everyone has their chushim, has their skills. Everyone has their opportunities. We all have our own sphere of influence. And the Rebbe said, the Rambam says, Ma'aseh echad, dibur echad, machshava achas. He doesn't say which person, every person. From my point of view, I've said this many times, it comes down to, okay, the mashke gistet, okay. Either other God or the garnish, right? From my point of view, b'derech hateva. I'm not talking about Momaila, Tchias HaMesim, Binyan Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. That's up to heaven. Momata l'mayla. I cannot, in the life of me, find an excuse why, with technology today, that the Rebbe made clear is le nivra elo. Just like Zohav was created only for the Beis HaMikdash. Technology was created only for one thing, for Mola Ores Deus Hashem. So there's no longer the excuse we don't have the pipelines and the distribution ability. That's absolutely not true. That's as far as the distribution. As far as the Teichen, we have Chassidus. 7 generations of the Rabbeim gave us Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe writes in the introduction in Tanya that Tanya has all the answers. And then you add all the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe and all the Maimorim of 7 generations, you have to really be an idiot to say that we don't have material. You have hundreds and hundreds of books. So we have the material. So we have the product. We have the distribution channels. So what's missing? What's missing? So 2 things could be missing. That we don't know how to translate the material. Yeah, we have it in Sam Gavov and Ayim Beis, Tanya, Likut Teira. It's in Hebrew and it's dense language and most people can't interpret it properly. But we have that as well. There are many people who do teach Chassidus, and they teach in a way that we see has impacted others. Even people who don't know Hebrew and don't know the language, it's changed people's lives. There are people sitting at this table that can testify to that. Hatanya and other Svarim have changed their lives. B'gashmi is Poshet. So we know there is a language. So the only thing then missing is the Yafutzu part. The Meinesecha is the product. The Chutzah is out there. There's an audience. And I should add, the audience is also receptive. People need this. They need Torah, they need Chassidus, they need this direction. We have the pipelines. So we have all the distribution channels. So the only thing missing is the actual distribution. We're not reaching hundreds of thousands, maybe a few million, but not million, tens of millions, not billions. You could say, who cares about numbers? Well, numbers count when you want to change a world. B'derech hateva, again, I'm not talking about ma'il l'mata. The Rebbe once wrote in a note, he wrote, Kimedumani haloshen hu yafutsu v'lo yatfisu ma'nesecha chutza. You know the difference? Yatfisu means to print. Like the Rebbe would say, like he said, Chof Ches Nissen, to print, and then Seliktaf Apollo, it's on a bookshelf. Printing is not that difficult. Actually, it's very easy to print. And if you can't find a publisher, there's a thing called vanity press, which means basically publishing your own chokhmas. So printing is not difficult today, on demand, digital, etc. Yafutsu is a whole different world. That means that it's not just reaching one person or 10 people, it means it's being spread. Hafotza, distributed. And to the chutza, she'en chutza memena. So I cannot say in any honesty, especially based on the work I do and what I'm involved in, that our Yafutsu comes close to what it should be. It's a joke, frankly. And if you need a comparison, lahavdil, if you need the lahavdils, take Apple and Amazon and Google and Facebook and a few other of the big giants out there. You want to look at their Yafutsu. I understand it's not my Nesecha Chutza, it's only Yafutsu. But look at it. Frankly, Kina Sofim Tarba Chachma is doable. And it didn't exist. Tavshin Nun Aleph, all these companies I just mentioned, they weren't even born yet. And look what they've done. So then, of course, the next answer people say, okay, because they're selling shtusim. It's easy to sell nonsense. So in other words, because it's emes, now we are faced with another problem. Emes doesn't sell, is that what it is? What about Avram Avinu, one man? Echad Avram came. He was only one. And today, most of the world follows the principles, the moral principles that Avram taught. That is emes. And the Rambam says that even Christianity and Islam, also the Yasher Saderech, you think the Rebbe would accept that? That emes can't be spread there. So when the Rebbe says the world is ready and we have to open our eyes and all the other expressions, to me it's very clear that Yafutsu is the key to it all. This doesn't take away, by the way, from any other efforts that Chabad houses do, that individuals do, because we don't know which one it is. You have to do everything. I'm speaking now a little bit, maybe it's my miktseiah somewhat, but it's directly, Yafutsu Ma'nesecha Chutza are not our words, it's Mashiach's own words to Baal Shem Tov. And that never changed that mission. So I would say, to sum up in short, we have one question to ask ourselves, and that is, what are you doing? You. Not me, not your father, not your mother, not the Rebbe, not the Eibishter, not anyone. What are you doing today and tomorrow? What's your achlata that it's not what you did yesterday, something different? When I say different, derech yeshara, we're not looking for new teiras, chas v'shalom, new methods, meaning new methods outside of teira, but new methods in your futsu, in doing possible to bring the words of teira, of chassidus, of the Rebbe, including about Mashiach and Gula, to people that has not been brought to, including ourselves maybe. That to me is the Chof Ches Nissen question. You ask that question, Shalas Chacham Chetzit Shuva. I have more to say on this topic, but it's a Farbrengen, and I want to I have a chashav, a partner here. The Farbrengen. And then we'll sing a nigun and say a few more words. And then you'll hear from me again. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not bashful. But l'chaim. Oh, now we can have a real l'chaim. Yeah. What's going on? Which bottle do we open here? There's too many choices. Huh? I'll just say l'chaim. The Rebbe is here with us right now, and his words are echoing. The Rebbe would say every year gets stronger and stronger. So may we live up to our responsibility and look at ourselves, not anyone else. Figure out what you're going to do. L'chaim. Yeah. Getting more urgent. Please go ahead.
I'd like to second what Reb Simon said before, that we've been Farbrengen for 32 years. Chavkas Nissan. And obviously, we would like this to be the last one. Be'ezras Hashem. One of the prominent chassidim of the Rebbe, even though he didn't necessarily look like a Rebbe, but he was definitely one of the Rebbe's big chassidim. His name was President Shazar. Eretz Yisrael had a president in the 60s. Now, Shazar, his real name wasn't Shazar. His real name, Shazar, was a Rosh Tevis, Shneir Zalmer Ubashov. So, but later when he came to Eretz Yisrael, so he changed it to Shazar. And so his name was Shneir Zalman. Everybody thinks he was named after the Alter Rebbe. He wasn't named after the Alter Rebbe. He was named after an uncle who was named after the Alter Rebbe. But there's a lot to talk about Shazar. But he was a real devoted chassid. He came to the Rebbe many times before he became president, and then he came many times when he was president, and then I was zeichet to be there the last time when he came to the Rebbe in Lamed Gimel on Yom Tammuz. Then he was no longer president, and the fact that he was no longer president was also a chelik of his chassidus, because he really wanted to run for a second term, and the Rebbe told him not to. So the fact that he was not the president was also part of his chassidus, but that's another whole story. But why am I bringing it? Because one of the things that Shazar did, which was to raise the chassidus in Israel, he used to come to Kfar Chabad every year when they used to make the famous Farbrengen of Yutas Kislev. And he used to be at the head table there, because Shazar came, so this made a lot to the Yom Tov. And the way we heard then that they used to record the whole event, and the Rebbe on Nittelnacht used to listen to the event of Yutas Kislev. That was one of the things that they said. When they wanted to, when the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe were talking about making a place which is called Kfar Chabad today, the government in Israel wanted to give the Lubavitchers for the refugees a place near Tzfas, that's where the old Mekubalim are. So that's where they're going to put the Lubavitchers. And the Rebbe, Davidic Rebbe, the Rebbe, they basically pushed in order it should be mamish in the center. And that's where they're one of the closest places to the airport, right near Tel Aviv. And Shazar was very instrumental in doing that. So one of the times that Shazar came to Kfar Chabad, after the Farbrengen of Yitzhak Kislev, they gave him a little tour of Kfar Chabad. One of the places where they stopped was in the house of, there was a painter, a Lubavitcher painter. His name was Zalman Kleiman. I'm sure many of you have seen his painting, Zalman Kleiman. So, in the 50s, he was still living in Eretz Yisrael. Later, he came to America. He lived there on Carroll Street. But when he was in Eretz Yisrael, so he used to paint. As a matter of fact, there's a beautiful letter from the Rebbe to Zalman Kleiman. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe got a certain magazine, Israeli magazine, and in the magazine, he saw that they have pictures of Zalman Kleiman's paintings. And the Rebbe commended him on it. He says, you're doing a very good job, and especially that you're making paintings of Kfar Chabad. So this is where people get to find out what Kfar Chabad is. But the Rebbe told him that he should also try to make paintings not only of the houses of Kfar Chabad, but also of the people and the way of life, etc. So Zalman Kleiman started making paintings of Farbrengens, where you see Chassidim in Farbrengen with Mashke and Dort, and some paintings where you see a little bit Lebediker, the way Chassidish Farbrengen looks like. When Shazar came to Kfar Chabad, one of the places they took him was to Zalman Kleiman's house. He looks around at the paintings, Shazar, and he sees one of the paintings of Chassidish Farbrengen. So he tells his entourage that was with him, you see, this is a painting of what we just came from, right? Because they were just now by the Farbrengen. Zalman Kleiman was this young Russian, he didn't. So he told Shazar, no. This is what the Farbrengen looks like after you leave, okay? When you're there, that's not exactly how. I see that tonight they seemingly made up as like two types. They made one Farbrengen, the big one, and then another one where we could get a little bit more avodim atzmai rather than avodim mazulas. But they say that Reb Chaim Brisker, I'm sure you heard of Reb Chaim Brisker, yeah? He's brought in Likutei Sichos, yeah, Meg. So Reb Chaim had a few sons, and one of them became a chosen. So he comes walking into the Besmedrash, and he goes over to his father, Reb Chaim. He tells him, that he became a chosen. So Reb Chaim says, oh, Mazel Tov, very nice, good. Then the chosen goes to his friends. His friends were sitting in the Besmedrash, and they all heard that he became a chosen. Oh, Lebedik Freilach. Reb Chaim heard how his son was boasting to his friends that he got a naden of 100,000 ruble, whatever it meant those days, a big amount of money. Reb Chaim heard it, and he didn't like that. So he goes over to the group, and he tells his son in front of the other boys, I'm not going to say his name, it's one of the sons, and he says, do you realize that the reason why you got such a naden is because you are Reb Chaim's son? So the son answers back to his father with the Recheretz. He says, you mean to say that you're worth only 100,000 ruble? So the son, that Reb Chaim answered back, my dear son, I am worth a couple of million ruble. The problem is that in this transaction, you are involved, so my value went down to 100,000. He wasn't making fun of his son. It was, as they discussed before by the program, a concept which is called in the Welt Yerida Saderis. So when something is on a real high level and then we take it down, then it loses a little bit of its value. The Rebbe spoke a sikh on Chavches Nissen, which we heard very eloquently before, and everybody knows of it by heart. But at the same time, the moment we are going to start explaining, it may start losing some of its original flavor. So, on the other hand, the Rebbe said, "Tu talst was ihr kennt." He sort of. So I would like to take it from a little bit of a different angle. And there's a long arichas. We're not going to go. We want to give back the floor to Reb Simon soon. But I would like to take just a few of the points of Chavchas Nissen after all these years of Farbrengen, where I think that there is a little bit of a misunderstanding that we need to clarify. Some people have labeled Chavchas Nissen that this is, the Rebbe has a lot of Mivtzoim, and this is the Mivtza Mashiach. This is the Mivtza of where the Rebbe came out with the concept of Mashiach. Now, after Chavchas Nissen, this is where it all started. There's a Maise, was mit erzählt in Chelm. You know Chelm? You ever heard of the city of Chelm? The Greise Chachamim. Now, Chelm gerade had people, the Greise Talmidei Chachamim. There were some big Lubavitcher Chassidim that came from Chelm. But for some reason, by Yidden, it became the city of Chelm.
We have many people from Chelm here in this community.
Well, yeah. If you look in the Hatamim and you look in those, you see Chelm all over the place. Sure. And the people in Chelm, one of the things that they had was there was a factory. And the factory in Chelm had workers. So comes Friday, and everybody has to get his paycheck. So there's one guy in the Chachamim from Chelm. His job was to give out the paychecks. So what does he do? He gets up there, and he has a list of 50 people. He calls Yankel Bereb Chaim, 20 ruble. Yankel comes and gets his Shmerel Bendos, you get 15 ruble. This one, that one, the whole list. Finally, he comes to the bottom. The last one, who's the last one that has to get his name is Sachakel. Sachakel gets 2,000 ruble. And at Heiptenstand, this guy doesn't understand. He says, I call out all the names for 20 ruble, for 15 ruble, everybody comes. I call up Sachakel. He's supposed to get 2,000 ruble, and he never shows up. Reb Sachakel. The Teretz is, Sachakel is not a mitzias for itself. Sachakel is what came from before. I have the great schus, as Reb Simon said before, that I was born to parents who were sent by the Rebbe on Shlichus 1958. I'm younger than that, so I was born already a few years after they were there. Italy, for those of you who have been there or not been there, is a very, very Catholic country. It's a goyish country, kipshuta. There's no such thing of going in the street and stopping a person and ask, are you Jewish? It doesn't exist. You're talking about 10,000 Jews versus 3.5 million goyim. So it doesn't exist. And when we were growing up, is that there was no kosher food. We had food, Baruch Hashem, but there was no, I remember the first time when a kosher bakery opened up, and then a restaurant opened up, but this was many years later. I never had the question of why am I here and not in Yerushalayim or in New York. I didn't know there's a place called Crown Heights. I knew Brooklyn. I knew New York. I knew New York, there's a big building, the biggest building in the world. I know New York has the two biggest things, the Gresta Tzaddik and the Gresta Binyan. Because at that time, the Empire State Building was the biggest building in the world. The World Trade Center didn't exist yet. But I always knew, and it wasn't mita bedafke, that why are we here? Because the Rebbe sent us here. Because the Rebbe wants to prepare the world for Mashiach. Zeh Pashat. It was in the blood. It wasn't something that was explained or said. The Rebbe in the last 50, 60, 70 years, the Rebbe made a lot of mivtzoim. The mivtzoim weren't mivtzoim in order to be mekarev Yidden. That's not what the Rebbe did. When you start giving a look into history, let's go bekitzer. Before the Rebbe's Nesias, the Friedrich Rebbe put him on 3 moistus. One is called Merkez Inyan Chinuch, one is called Machen Yisrael, one is called Kahas. These were the 3 jobs that the Rebbe had from the Friedrich Rebbe. If you look in the back of the Hayom Yom or in the back of the Tzvarim, you have basically a list. If you look at Machen Yisrael, the job of Machen Yisrael, it says over there, the Matara, what is the goal? To tell the whole world, prepare them for the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. What is one of the things to do? There's 3 things there. One of them is, believe it or not, Mishnayis Balpeh. To learn Mishnayis Balpeh. And someone could think, what's the connection of Mishnayis Balpeh? Your Jews have been learning Mishnayis Balpeh for, I don't know if there was ever a mitzvah Mishnayis Balpeh. But one of the main things of Machen Yisrael is Mishnayis Balpeh. Thank God there was a very, very clever Jew in Montreal, and his name was Harav Gringlas. And Harav Gringlas asked the Rebbe many, many questions in the early years, in the time of the Rebbe in the 40s. And because of Rabbi Gringlas, we have so many beautiful biurim from the Rebbe on a lot of things. And he asked the Rebbe, what's the Mishnayos Baal Peh business? And the Rebbe wrote a whole essay on Mishnayos Baal Peh. Towards the end, what is the connection of Mishnayos Baal Peh to the Geula? And the Rebbe brings over there from different places that, first of all, it says that Eina Golius Miskansis Elo Beskusa Mishnayos, that we're going to go out of Golus through the Beskusa Mishnayos. But then the Rebbe brings a very unbelievable, I believe it's Azar Chodesh or Medrash Talpias, where the Medrash says like this, that when they judge a person, when he comes up Lamaila, and they ask him, and they judge him, that he has to go to the left, unfortunately, not to Gan Eden, to the other side. And they're taking him. What does a person do when you take him and it starts getting hot? He starts screaming for help. So he calls over to all the Shvatim, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, ve'ein koil ve'ein oine. There's nobody answering, nobody home. Keshekoire le Asher, when he calls Asher, Asher asks him a question. Karasa miyomecha Mishnah. Did you ever learn a Mishnah in your life? And if the person says, yes, I learned a Mishnah, miyad meitzia misham. Asher takes him out. And the Rebbe shows that there's a comparison between the concept of Gehenim and the concept of Golus, by Avraham Avinu, etc. So the Rebbe says, and therefore, why do we push the concept of Mishnayos Baal Peh? Because Mishnayos Baal Peh is what's going to pull us out of here. So we see that everything that the Rebbe did was a clear, straight connection to the going out of Golus. It wasn't that concept of learning Mishnayos, like people learn a Mishnah every single day. That's not the point. It's a total different point. If somebody wants to get really deeper into it, what's up is Asher? We all know that in the month of Nissan that we are in now, in the beginning of the month, we say the Nesiim every single day. The Nasi of Yud Aleph Nissan is Nasi Livnei Asher. And there's a beautiful letter from the Rebbe's father about it, but we're not going to get into that. When we go weiter, in Tafshin Yud Aleph, by the Weimar, where the Rebbe said, the Basel Gani, that this is the last generation of Golus, first generation of Geula, where the Rebbe really set it down. Then the Rebbe started with the concept of matzah, and then, but closer to home, my parents were in Shlichus, was in Tafshin Yotes, 1958 in the December. A few months before, the Rebbe started a new slogan. The slogan is called Ufaratzta. Anybody in the world after that knew what's the slogan of Lubavitch? Ufaratzta. What is Ufaratzta? Spreading all over the world. That's the way people say, because that's what Pasuk says. Ufaratzta yom avakenu v'tzafein v'negva. The answer is no. That's not why the Rebbe said Ufaratzta. I'm holding here a letter from the Rebbe to my father. And I've said this on many occasions, but I never said the end of this letter, which I want to bring out over here. First of all, the Rebbe connected Ufaratzta when he started it, because Mashiach is called Hapoiritz, all Hapoiritz lifneim, Ufaratzta, Poretz, etc. But this is a letter. I'll just give also a little bit the background. For my father to go away from the Rebbe was literally like taking a fish out of the water. But the Rebbe sent him on Shlichus. He went to Chayfetz Gadol. You talk about in 1958. The moment they landed in Milan, my father told my mother, you will see, I will go to the Rebbe every Shabbos Mevarchim. Those days, people didn't travel once in 6 years to America, okay? My father said, you'll see, I'm going to go every Shabbos Mevarchim. They came, was Yutas Kislev. Came Yud Shvat. This was the first time my father was missing a Farbrengen, besides Shabbos Mevarchim, but Yud Shvat. He went crazy. Then came Purim. My father went nuts. He's missing already the second big Farbrengen of the Rebbe, besides Shabbos Mevarchim. When it came to Pesach, he said, Adkan. He has to go for the last days. But he didn't have a cent to his name. Allah has come to buy a ticket. So my father went over to one of the Zippel brothers, who Rabbi Simon Jacobson is a name after his grandfather, Rabbi Simon, who was the first connection of this family, the Zippel brothers, to the Rebbe, to Lubavitch, to the Rebbe. And the oldest of the brothers who you got to meet, he was the one that actually was close to the Rebbe later, and he's the one that asked the Rebbe to send someone to Italy. So my father went over to one of the younger ones, and I don't know what he told him, and that he should buy him a ticket to go to the Rebbe for the last days of Pesach. And he bought him a ticket to go the last days. This was the second or the third day of Chol HaMoed. My father is the happiest man on earth. He's standing downstairs from the front of the house. He's waiting for the taxi. The taxi is coming to pick him up to go to the airport. He has a ticket. He's going to the Rebbe. As he's waiting for the taxi, the mailman comes. And we lived in an apartment building at that time. And the mailman puts in letters in all the boxes. And my father sees that there's a letter in his box. So he figured, let's see who it is. It's this letter right here. You can see it says Garelick, B'Ksav Yad Kodesh. The date is Yud Beis Nissan Tafshin Yutes. And the Rebbe writes, what? Right before Pesach. And the Rebbe writes them like this: in response to your letter of Hey Nissan, you're writing that you have a Kasalka Daituch to go away from Milan for the last days of Pesach. So the Rebbe says, Muven hapelish bedover, the astonishment of this, because this is the first Pesach that you're in your community. Zman Cheruseinu, Yetzim min hakotze lakotze. And this is a perfect time when the people in the Kehillah need to hear from you special hashpos. And if the first days of Pesach, Allah has come the last days of Pesach, and because the first days are the whatever, the Shvi Shel Pesach, Achar Shel Pesach, and Achar Shel Pesach is the union of Gula Achreinu, Bias Mashiach, as it explains in the Sichos of Rabbi Nesienu, etc. The Rebbe finishes off like this: Ve'yirotzen, that through Simcha v'tuv levav, with a gladness of your heart, on the Atzlacha Gdeila Shenitnu Loi, the big Atzlacha was given to you and to your wife to be Mephitz the Mayones in your city, in Milan. And from there it'll go to Svivei Seho, to the other places around. Yenatzel kol yom v'yom. You're going to take advantage of every single day, especially the Yomim Tovim, and especially Achar Shel Pesach. And by the way, because of this letter, for the next 50 years, my father never came for any Yom Tov to the Rebbe. He came once, Simchas Torah, I think Tafshim Mem Aleph. That was the first time he saw Simchas Torah downstairs. He always remembered it upstairs. Okay, but because of this letter. But then the Rebbe says that you're going to make use of it. Lematoro hamura bekivun, in the direction of the ufaratsta ze Mashiach. Ubifrat besutz the David Malka Mashiach. So the Rebbe makes it very, very clear. What is the idea of ufaratsta ze Mashiach? This is what it is. And this is what we lived with all along. What happened with the ticket? But those days you were able to get refunded without okay. My father always did everything b'simcha of tuv levav. Anyways, so there's really a lot to talk about this. So everything that the Rebbe did, and even ufaratzta, then of course the miftzayim, das doch ageret. Then when it came to Rambam, why do we learn Rambam? Because we learn Grace Lamdani, we learn Grace Rosh Yeshivas. We're learning Rambam for the very, very simple reason, because everything. It says in Sefer HaGilgulim, the Alter Rebbe brings it in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that every single neshama has to come down and learn all the Taryag mitzvahs, and if not, it has to come down later in a Gilgul again. We are the last generation of Golus, and the only way to learn all the Taryag mitzvahs is if you learn Rambam. So the Rebbe always, every single thing was connected to the concept of Mashiach. So b'meile, when it came to Chavches Nissen, it's not the pshat the Chavches Nissen mit amol the Rebbe started a new mitzvah called Mitzvah Mashiach. Absolutely not. Chavches Nissen was the sachakel of everything that happened in the 50 years before. And the Rebbe says, okay, now I gave you the whole package. Now, and it's not the pshat that the Rebbe said, as the Rebbe Simon said beautifully before, that I did everything I can, I'm giving it to you, and he's going on vacation. No. As a matter of fact, I can remember that Thursday night after the Rebbe said the Sikha, we were trembling like who knows what, because we thought that we thought that that's what the Rebbe said, that is done, and we figured we'll wait till the next morning at 10 o'clock and see if the Rebbe comes to Shachris. That means that we didn't understand what the Rebbe said yesterday. But if the Rebbe doesn't come out to Shacharis, then we know we're in trouble. And the Rebbe used to come in at 10 o'clock. And 10 o'clock came and the Rebbe didn't come in. And 5 after 10 comes and the Rebbe didn't come in. 10 after 10, the Rebbe didn't come in. 10:15, the Rebbe didn't come in. 10:20, the Rebbe walked in. So you were able to feel the diffusion of the tenseness of the moment. But basically, as we went along and started understanding a little more, we saw that what the Rebbe is basically saying, not I did everything I can, I'm giving it to you. I did everything I can, if I understood it correctly, to get you to understand what is Mashiach. In other words, if we keep on screaming at Mosai because the Rebbe wants us to scream at Mosai, that means that we are not asking for Mosai, we're asking for the Rebbe is asking. The Rebbe wants that we should be able to understand why it's at Mosai. If we understand it, if we feel it, then the mission has been accomplished. And in order to do that, which we will continue a little bit later, but I definitely wanted to take, basically what happened was that for 2 weeks after the Rebbe said, "Tutals was Kent," everybody went haywire. The place went haywire. Do this, do that. The Poil 2 weeks later, to make a long story short, the Rebbe gave this booklet, which we'll discuss if we'll have the time. And in this booklet, you have the ABC of Mashiach. Someone who knows this booklet, I think, gets the point of what Chavkas Nissen is. Someone who doesn't know the booklet, then obviously he is missing the point of what Mashiach is all about. And I'm just going to briefly say that today when you go to the stores, you can buy the Dvar Malchus. The Dvar Malchus that you buy in the store today is the grandchild of this, and this is the Zayde. Because what happened was, this Dvar Malchus started, today what you have in Dvar Malchus is Sichis and Rambam and Shiur Chitas and everything a chassid needs, lefierch, you know, to run through the week in the simple way. How it started was because there was a chassid in Eretz Yisrael. Am I going over time? There was a chassid in Eretz Yisrael. He just passed away, unfortunately, 2 years ago. And Tuvia, yeah. And he wanted to spread the sichas of the Rebbe. The world out there is not very used to the Rebbe's language. To us chassidim, we learn a sicha. The Rebbe starts with Rashi, then he goes to halacha, then it goes to Kabbalah, then he goes to Ma'aseh B'Poel. The world out there is not used to it. The world out there is Gemara, halacha is halacha, Ma'aseh B'Poel is Ma'aseh B'Poel. So what he did was he used to give out a booklet called Dvar Malchus, and in it he would put the sicha, and at the end he would add a letter from the Rebbe, a geschmack letter, and a story. So this way, and the people would pick it up to read the story, and then Mamela, they would also pick it up to read the sicha. As you can see, this one is number Yud Beis, number 12. When the Rebbe said Tutals Wasser Kent, the following Shabbos, Tazrim Etzera, like it's not the same kvias, but the Rebbe said that what he meant with Tutals Wasser Kent is to learn the subject, just to understand what it is. Because Shabbos, everybody knows what Shabbos is. Erevin, not everybody. Some people think they know, some people don't, whatever. But when it comes to Tumas Tzaras, less people know. When it comes to Mashiach, most people have no idea what it is. Throughout history, people did not learn the halachas of Mashiach, did not learn the history of Mashiach. Why? Because it wasn't negayat. It's a story which is going to, just like somebody now is not going to sit down and learn Hilchas Rosh Hashanah. They're going to learn Hilchas Yom Tov for Shavuos maybe, but not Rosh Hashanah. Al derech zeh, Mashiach was something which was not on the practical. It was just a fantasy. So therefore, the subject wasn't learned. The place where somebody gets the halachas of Mashiach is in the Rambam. We're in the Rambam, in the last 2 chapters. So this person who used to give out this Dvar Malchus, what he did was very, very smart. He gave out a booklet, Dvar Malchus, which has in the back the last 2 prakim of the Rambam, Perik Yud Aleph and Perik Yud Beis of Hilchas Melachim, which is, in the big picture, the whole Sefer HaRambam has 1,000 chapters, the whole Sefer HaRambam. So this is chapter 999 and chapter 1,000. So he printed these 2 prakim, plus he added also the uncensored part of the Rambam, and in the front he put 4 sichas from the Rebbe, 2 sichos on Perek Yud Aleph and 2 sichos on Perek Yud Beis. And this is what he gave out in Israel. And they sent a copy to the Rebbe. When the Rebbe got this was on Tezvav, on Bahab. The Rebbe got it before Mincha. And the Rebbe, when he went into the elevator to go downstairs to Mincha, the Rebbe told Rabbi Groner, at least that's the way I heard it then, that he would like to distribute this tonight, so they should print 10,000 of it. 10,000 by tonight by Maidiv, because the Rebbe wants to give it out. The Rebbe spoke a sicha by Mincha, Tezvav, like he would do pretty often. At the end of the sicha, the Rebbe did something which he never did before. I'm sure you've seen videos of the Rebbe giving out Maimorim, Sichos, Kuntreisim, Tanyas. I don't think there was, besides one time for the Shluchim, I think, for the Shluchim, I think, the Rebbe said he's going to give out a Kuntris to the Shluchim. But otherwise, the Rebbe never announced before that he's going to distribute something. Even the Tanyas that the Rebbe gave at the end of Farbrengen and Vidal of Nissan twice, at the end of Farbrengen, the Rebbe said he's going to give the Tanyas. And the people who were in charge of the printing of the things, Vadel Vatsuchas, Shalom, etc., he had an uncle, Shalom Jacobson, they kept their mouths shut and they did all the printing and prepared everything. And this, when it came to Mincha, at the end of Mincha, the Rebbe said that Emir Hashem, after Maidiv, we are going to be distributing for my mother Razal and Biurim from Rabbi. Whatever, it was a very interesting lashon. After Maidiv, now Mincha was at 3:15. The Rebbe said this was about 3:30. Maidiv was in the summertime. It's 9:30. So there were 6 hours between Mincha and Maidiv. People came from Chicago, from Montreal, from wherever within 6 hours that you could make it to Mincha, to Maidiv. And the Rebbe, that's what I heard then, that the Rebbe gave out to Anoshim, Noshim, V'tav, 9,500 of these. Azet Minyam would get at the numbers. I don't know. If it's more, if it's less, I have no idea. But the bottom line is the Rebbe gave this to men, women, and children. Why? Because the Rebbe wants that everybody should know the ABC of Mashiach. If someone doesn't go through these 4 sichos, he has absolutely no clue what the concept of Mashiach is. So I think on a practical level, what Chavkas Nissan, what the Rebbe requests is that Mashiach should no longer be a concept which is out there, which a controversial issue, or we are not sure what it is. Most people, for example, when you ask them, what is the first thing you're looking forward to when Mashiach comes? The average person will say, especially if you lost a loved one, the concept of Tchias HaMesim. When we look in the Rambam in Halacha Beis, in Halacha Gimel, the Rambam right away says, Val Yalal Daitach, it shouldn't even enter your mind that Mashiach is going to do Tchias HaMesim. That someone who's looking forward to Tchias HaMesim is a tipish. So obviously the Rambam has a different type of Mashiach than what the average person has in mind. So this is the Rebbe's request, and he gave it out to everyone, that when it comes to Chavkas Nissan, we should again rejuvenate our achlata to be able to make sure that we have a clarity on the subject the way the Rebbe wants us to have it. There's a lot more to add, but the Rabbi, I think, will take a little break. And
What year were you born? You were born what year? L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. To continue for Rabbi Garelick concluded, I'd like to bring it even to more practical terms. So when the Rebbe said, Lilmid Inyan Gula Mashiach, as Rabbi Levi just explained, you can't live with something if you don't know what it is. They say if you can't dream about it, you're never going to realize it. And that, in fact, it's also about Shabbos and anything. That's why Shleishim Yom Kedem Achag, you have to learn about Hilchos Pesach. Because you can't know how to do Pesach if you don't know what it is. So that's the first half. The second half is how do you actualize Mashiach in our personal lives? So it's true, Kol Ha'esek B'Teira Se'ela, when you learn about something, Kila Hikriv, it's as if you did it. But no, we also want not just the Geula in Teira, we want the Geula in the Ma'aseh B'Peil. Like the Rebbe Marash had said, he has the Semach Tzedek by the Ketz of Tafresh Gimel. What happened with Mashiach? She said, look what the Teira was printed. So he said, yeah, but we want Mashiach Ma'aseh B'Peil, Mata Masarat Foch. So the second part is Talmud Gadol Shemevil De Ma'aseh, is living with it. Now, anytime you heard the Rebbe's Sikha, Rabbi Levi explained it in the context of the different campaigns, so to speak, and all the programs that Rebbe instituted from the beginning. And going back, if you want, to Rebbe's childhood, he writes very the famous letter that even as a young child, he envisioned it. The Deir HaShvi's Inyan is to be mamchish, Shchanti B'Seicham, not just in Rakia HaShvi or HaShishi or HaChamishi, but Shchanti B'Seicham Ba'oretz. So it has to be something that's mamoshes, that real. So if you really look at the undercurrent of every Sikh of the Rebbe, it's all about being mamchish, making it tangible, relevant, applicable, personal. Elokus. But what's Gili Elokus? People miss a key point in Tanya when he says, chapter Perek Lamed Zayin, right in the beginning. You know, Mashiach is a word. Gul is a word. Mashiach is the individual that will take the Eden, the world, and redeem them, like Moshe at the time of Gael Rishon. Gula is the Matzava Elam. The world will be a redeemed world. But how do you translate that? So in Chassidus, the language in Tanya, one line, he says, V'hinei tachlis sh'yimesa Mashiach v'tchiyas ha'mesim. The tachlis of B'riyas Elam that he explains in chapter 36. And he says, Shehu gili erein sov elam hazagashmi. That's what it is. The Elokus will be tangible, will be like B'chol Derechecha Deyu, in every aspect of our lives we'll experience it. That's totally b'maseinu v'avidaseinu. You can't even overestimate the chiddush in this, which the Alter Rebbe is basically saying, it's not Mashiach is just a Inyas Guli, we do a mitzvah and the Eibishter will reward us. It's Schar mitzvah. In other words, Mashiach and Gul is not just the end, is not just a event that will happen. In Torah, which is the belief in other systems, in Torah and Judaism, Mashiach is the end of a process that began when Ruach Elikim Rachefes al Pnei Hamayim, Ruach Shel Mashiach, and like the Simona says in Sanhedrin, the whole world was created from Mashiach. The tachlis of creation from day one, from the early, even before day one, the Sav HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashiach. So Mashiach is the actualization of the very purpose of existence. And every good deed and every mitzvah and every Mesiras Nefesh is all building blocks that accumulate And the sum total, it's like Sachakel, is Geula. So every time you do a mitzvah, you do a good deed, it's not just as Geula, the Eibishter said, one action can tip the scale. Your action, like he says in Tanya, Yichud Zeh Nitzchi L'mayla, it's a Nitzchi, you're bringing a little Elikus. Mashiach is Gilead and Saf Lamata. Every mitzvah is a little Mashiach, basically, a little Geula. And that's why Maseinu V'Avadeseinu is so critical, which again emphasizes our effort, not just coming Momaila. We are active participants in this process. So how do you mamchish, how do you translate Mashiach and Geula in our personal lives? I want to address that because I find that if you can't answer this basic question, it's very difficult to imagine or to dream or to definitely live Mashiachdik. And the question is a simple question. If Mashiach comes right now, I'm not getting into now if he can come by night, that the Rebbe would say that Mashiach will answer all these questions. So we're not worried about when. It should happen already. If Mashiach comes right now, what's going to happen? Will this table disappear? What about the popcorn and the chips? What about this video camera? What about us? Will there be birds? Will there be trees? Will Kingston Avenue disappear? Let's talk reality. We all know you wake up tomorrow morning, everyone knows the same street you live on, that's what the same street's going to be there. Mashiach comes, what's going to happen? As Levi quoted the Rambam, there's no miracles. Later Tkufa, there'll be miracles. There'll be a Shinui Ma'aseh Bereishis. Chassidus talks about the Chidushim. But on a very basic level, especially in the beginning, so what will be different? Today is Wednesday night, tomorrow morning if Mashiach comes. I've asked this question to myself, to many, many people, and I have to sadly tell you that most people don't have an answer. They can't really spell it out like in a practical way. Will you go to shul tomorrow morning, or are we all on the way to Eretz Yisrael? Beis HaMikdash. And if you can't answer that question, you can't even practically visualize what life is going to look like. Your life, your house, your work, whatever it is you're involved in, your bochur, whatever it may be. So Behegdim, there's a Sikha Shavuos Tovshin Aleph, Friedrich Rebbe. It's a few weeks before the Rebbe came to America. We know the Rebbe came a month from Chav Ches Nissan, 2 months rather, Chav Ches Sivan. The Rebbe came to America in Tovshin Aleph. So the Shavuos before that, you could check it out, Sefer HaSichos Tovshin Aleph. Friedrich Rebbe is talking about Mashiach, and he talks like this. He says, imagine that you are told that you're going to be hosting a very special guest in your house. He's coming a certain day, he's going to stay by you. What will your house look like when the special guest arrives? You're going to clean up your act. The house is going to look different. Friedrich Rebbe says, Agast Kumbald, and his name is Mashiach. And each of us have to prepare our homes and our environment for this special guest. So some Chassidim understand the remez in it. A few weeks from then, the Rebbe came to America. I'm not going to interpret the Sikha, but you could look it up yourself and interpret as you see fit. But what I really want to emphasize here, it's very interesting. If the Rebbe would come to stay, Shabbos is coming in a few days. Let's say you got a note from the Rebbe's decided to come to stay by you in your house this weekend. What would happen in your house? Besides the physical cleanup, what kind of behavior, how would the children behave, how would the parents behave, what would it look like? So that's a very practical way of understanding of how to live up to something. Whether we can maintain that more than one weekend is another story, but at least you can envision, because if the Rebbe says, I'd like to stay a little longer, so then you're going to have to be on good behavior for a while. So I want to give 2 examples. I think I've done this already, but I think very practical. And I'm basing it on 2 sichos also said that year in Tavshin Nun Aleph. Remember, after Chav Ches Nissan came, you said Tezva of a year, and then every Shabbos the Rebbe Farbrengen. And obviously he was building upon what he had just said. The Rebbe did not forget what he said. So he was giving us more tools. So the 2 sichos, especially Achrik Deishim that year in Emir, But the Rebbe spoke by Riches about Geula and Geula. Famous expression from Medrash that Geula is simply Geula with an Aleph. In other words, no big change except one Aleph. And the Rebbe, I remember one of the in Achrik Deshim, that year, the Rebbe began the Farbrengen, or early on the Farbrengen, the Rebbe smiled and said that he's getting letters from people who are afraid that if Mashiach comes, what's going to happen with all their, what we call today, equity. Everything they built up, their businesses, their investments, connections, networks. You know, one of the most valuable things for people is the reputation, the business connections they built. The Rebbe was talking about the immediacy of Mashiach coming. What will happen to all of this? So the Rebbe said, Nafresh made a home. There's nothing to be afraid of because Geula is not minus, it's only a plus. Everything you have will remain. There'll be additions. Geula cannot exist without Geula. The word Geula. It's made up of everything that exists in Geula except one key difference. That we'll see the Aluf Shalelim in everything. See the godliness in everything. Which really is what the Rambam says. It doesn't have to be a Shinui Ma'aseh Bereishis. This world God created. There's just a tzimtzum and a hell, and we don't see in Lashon HaChassidus the divine hand. But when we do see, you'll see the energy within it, you know. Today it's not difficult, by the way, to explain even to people who are kavyochel, not my minim, because everyone knows in science, this table is not just a table. This chair is not just a chair. Everybody knows that everything that we see is the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lie molecules. Water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, H2O, which in turn are made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of subatomic particles and subatomic. And you keep going down the rabbit hole, it goes into deeper levels of energy. So what's the pellet to say? There's one more level, or many more levels, called spiritual energy, what we call Dvar Hashem, K'yech and everything. Not such a crazy concept today. It doesn't require a leap. It means that this is the surface. So the Gili of the Aleph is taking the same equity, the same connections, the same home, everything you have, but you don't see it as an end in itself. In the Lashon Rambam, which you might see, the Lashon in Tanya, Gili Erein Sof Be'elam Hazeh. And the Lashon Rambam is Lo Yeh Esek Kol Ha'elam El Dasas Hashem Bilvad. There'll be a Esek, there'll be a Elam, but it won't be business as usual, as materialism as an end in itself. It'll be everything's b'chol d'rachecha de'eyu. You'll see the dasas Hashem in everything. Eden, Goyim, the Rambam makes it clear. Kol ha'aretz, mola ha'aretz deis Hashem, k'mayim le'yam mechasim. And Eden will be chachomim and avenim, as the Alter Rambam explains. So I want to give two very practical examples for this. And I think if each of us can find mepsari echzalekah in your flesh, one of the chidushim of the Alter Rebbe Chassidus, is that it's not just a mashal, that this world is an example for godliness. It's godliness that's dressed up in the levush called b'sari, tzelem elikim. So when you look at yourself, you're seeing a mirror image of what a lakus looks like. So if we can find, every person on their own, a way to see the Aleph in your own life, that is a taste of Geula. That's what Chassidus teaches us to do. So two examples. One is a letter from the Rebbe, and one is an experience I had, which is based on what I learned from these sikhs, especially Achrik Deshim and Emir. So the letter is from Tafshin Yud Gimel. It's a letter, I think I'm probably chazed a number of times. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but it's meidik, both in its simplicity and also its universal message. So it's a letter of all people. It's a person who owned the cleaners, the dry cleaners. The Rebbe writes to him, everything, Baal Shem Tov said, everything is Eirah and Avedis Hashem. So your work is some lesson. What's the lesson in dry cleaning or cleaning? You know, we know lessons in medicine and science, but cleaning, it seems like a very menial. And the Rebbe says, what's the chiddush of cleaners? You buy a new garment, a beged chadash. You wear it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5. After a while, it gets stained, it gets wrinkled, it gets dirty. If you're a Balbatisha person, you can't keep wearing it. I know there's some people don't have that issue, but derech klal, it's an issue. So you think, okay, at some point you have to throw it out. No. Comes the cleaners and innovated this. You bring it to cleaners. You put the beged in water. You wash it. Not just water, warm water. You mix with chemicals that remove different stains. And then you put it under a heavy press. You press it, and you have a fresh garment like new. And you could repeat this process many times in the life of a garment. The lesson, the shomesh and asata bi tahirihi. We say every morning. But then life takes over. And all kinds of things happen in life. Disappointments. We betray ourselves. We betray our purpose. We betray our destiny. You know, what we call aveda, philosophy havara, ayeka. We get dissonance. We get displaced. So we get soiled and we get stained and we get wrinkled. Life does this to people. We all know. So you think, okay, it's a one-way street. You started tahirihi, and now it's not so tahir. It's not so beautiful and pure. Comes the cleaners and teaches us, no. Take the neshama and you immerse it in water. Ein mayim elatera. And not just stam water, warm water, chemimus, varim kait, and eish. Have a kiddush be'eish, varim kait, chsidish kait. And then you mix it with chemicals. Every mitzvah is another chemical. Every mitzvah is a tikkun for another stain, another chsad, that you mamala, that you correct, tikkun apgomim, and achsomim, and all the stains that of life. And then you put it under Kabbalas El, Malchus Shamayim, oil, a heavy press, accountability. Understand that you answer to Eibishter, you feel that achrayas, and you have neshamash and asata bi tahiri exactly as it was, and you could repeat this process your whole life. Unbelievable letter, just in its own. I could tell you, I remember they read the letter. I guess when the Igris came out, I don't remember exactly when I read it. I happened to be walking on Kingston Avenue. I was by Empire and in Kingston. And yeah, I suddenly noticed the dry cleaners there. Now, usually you only see a cleaners when you need a cleaners. Who even looks at it? Even then, you need your wife to remind you and so on. And then you walk another 2 blocks, Crown and Kingston, there's another dry cleaners. And there's one between Union and President, and now one Troy and Albany. And I never looked at the dry cleaners again the same way. Because the Rebbe, when you look through the Rebbe's lens, he doesn't see cleaners. He sees a dugma for Lakus in this Welt. It's melubish in the marshal, in the levushim of cleaners. And if you take it a step further, you can look at the pizza shops and the bakeries and even Sweet Expressions and all the other stores and all the other industries. This is all Gela, and all you need is the Aleph. Now, of course, our Rebbe has that Klarkeit. The Rebbe says he sees. That's not F in the Eigen. Everyone says, what means F in the Eigen? Someone told me, my eyes are open all the time. I don't see anything. Okay, but you know, the Rebbe once wrote to someone that by a Farbrengen, some people sleep with their eyes closed, and most sleep with their eyes open. I can tell you, Badik Manus, I give many talks, and many people sleep with their eyes open. Some with their eyes closed, if you say. The point is, seeing something, it's not just seeing, it doesn't physical eyes. Yeah, you can see things, but they're seeing and they're seeing. So the Rebbe gave us every Farbrengen, every Sikha, literally. Just listen to any Farbrengen. What is the Rebbe doing? He's looking at the world through the eyes of Elokus and letting us see it that way, which really is the eyes of Geula, the Etzem. So what will happen if Mashiach comes today? Everything that exists in this world will remain there. We're talking about Dvarim, Kumuvim, Mutarim, things that are Piteir, Al Pi Alocha. Not things that, even as Dvarim Asurim will also take time. It says, Ruach Hatum Avim in Haaretz, and Shchitas Yetzar is not right away. But for all practical purposes, the Divrei Reshus of this world, you'll see the Aleph in it. Let's be realistic. None of us right now on our madrege, with our whatever level you think you are. We can't find that example, just like from the cleaners, some area of your life and find what does it look like, so-called through eyes of Gela, and what does it look like with the eyes of the Aleph, of Geula? It's not that difficult. Once the Rebbe opens your eyes and say, oh, you can look at cleaners, everything has lessons like this. And indeed, you have actually. Someone wrote a book of all the lessons that Rebbe wrote, lessons from different miktzayim, from carpentry and from art. I mean, I actually, when I wrote Torah Meaningful Life, I looked up many of these sikhs. The Rebbe has tremendous lessons from everything, medical things and science. Remember the Rebbe spoke of the Begishas how many times when they landed on the moon, spoke about the space travel, always. So it's the same world, just the same world with a whole different perspective. Mamish what the Rambam says and what the Alter Rebbe says. The second example, which I learned from this, so I was invited once to a medical conference, not because I'm a doctor and I'm not the son of a doctor, but because a few doctors who knew me, they wanted me to give a take. They wanted something interesting. They brought me to entertain them, I guess. It wasn't entertainment. They wanted to know what is medicine of the future according to Judaism and Kabbalah going to look like. It was interesting to them. So I made a presentation. I said, remember, I'll say Bekitzer because negate to the main punchline, that according to Judaism, death, illness, disease, is an aberration. It's not a dover TV. Had Adam and Chava not eaten from the tree of knowledge, from Eitz Hadas, said they would live forever. The male is the same thing, disease and illness. Why shouldn't they? A neshama is not like a car. It doesn't run out of gas. Why should a neshama give life to a body forever and ever? Doesn't make sense even. The neshama is it's coming from the source of life. Why should it ever run out? The problem is not the neshama, the guf. So Chassidus explains, based on the Rambam, and other places, that once Adam and Chava ate from the Eitz Hadas, in a sense, like they punctured, so to speak, Elam Hazet, the body. Like if you put liquid in a cup, there's no reason it should ever run out of the cup. I'm not talking about evaporation. Why would it ever run out? However, if you make holes in the cup, so an appliance, why will an appliance ultimately burn out or break down? Not because electricity is missing. It's because the appliance wears down. That's what it is. It's a gashmizdika thing. Kol heva nifsad. Everything wears down, deteriorates, and ultimately cannot contain the energy in it. Through our Aveda, by fixing these punctures, that's called tikkun, and we correct all the mistakes, and we realign guf to the neshama and elam hazet to kavonas habeira. So we then, as a keli felukus. So why? So there would be elimination of disease, illness, and death. Rachmana litzlan. That's a simple logic. That's why the Gemara says, "Antchias hamesim." It's not such a chiddush. Maida hava, maida loy hava hava. So maida hava for sure hava. You're just going back to the way it was in its original state. Okay, that was my general presentation. So one of the hosts, the doctor gets up and asks, if that's the case, there will be no more death, illness, disease. What's going to happen with us doctors? So many doctors in the world. So after, of course, the prerequisite joke, which is maybe that's why they charge so much for a long retirement, Mashiach retirement, I said, Adarab, on the contrary. And I took it based on the sikhs and others. Doctors, instead of dealing with the pain of suffering of illness, disease, death, and all that comes in suffering, you'll do the most noble thing possible. Since you have intimate knowledge in human anatomy and biology and chemistry, and the human body was created in the divine image, Salam Alikim, and Mipsari Echzalika. So you'll teach us secrets about godliness, Deus Hashem, that only you know, because you know the things that others don't know. Just as astronomers will teach this about the cosmos, and physicists about physics, and for that matter, computer programmers in this, and business people in their area, and cleaners and dry cleaners through cleaners. You should have seen the reaction they had. It was unbelievable. It was mostly secular doctors. They were like so taken by this, because they never heard anything like this. And it was completely munach by them. It wasn't like crazy stuff, need to have faith. They understood it. And of course, that's the most beautiful thing of all. Like the Alter Rebbe writes in Ageres HaKedesh, more or less in Simach Chavov, he says, even in Torah, the idea of Eitz Hadas, Tevara, we no longer will need Torah to tell us Tevara. There won't be any Tevara. So what will be the inyan of Limud HaTorah? It says, L'chiyachid yichudim elyein. That was basically the basis of this. It's a tremendous piece that the Rebbe wrote, B'Ksav Yad Kodshe, in the Sikha Vayigash, Chelik Chov Hei. It's a Sikha about Talmud and Maisa, Yosef and Yehuda. The Rebbe asks a question there that we know there's Machlekes Talmud Gadol or Maisa Gadol. So the Rambam, the Gemara answers in Kedushin, Talmud Gadol, Shemevi Le Maisa. It's B'chol Masayim, you have both. So the Rebbe asks the question, so why does it say in Medrash Shmuel and other places in the name of the Arizal that Loselovi will be Maisa Gadol? If Talmud has both Milas, why suddenly Mashiach comes Maisa? What happens with Talmud? So the Rebbe has an answer. The Sikha was prepared and was the whole answer. And when they gave it in for Agah, Chelik Chofei Vayigash, the Rebbe added B'Ksav Yad Kodshe, a whole sif, a beer, and then there's the second beer that was there before. The Rebbe writes, it's just one of the most beautiful pieces. Not the Rebbe needs Mayas comment, but it's just so eloquent. He says, why do you need Talmud? Because we don't naturally know what the Eibishter wants. Your body knows when it's hungry. You don't need to look in the Shulchan Aruch when you're hungry or tired. Your body will tell you. But Ruchnius, to know what the Eibishter wants, unless you're a tzaddik, that's mamish durach and durach, how do you know today is Shabbos or not? Because you look in a luach, you look in a Shulchan Aruch, it tells you what to do. But la'asid love will be v'nigla kveida v'averol kol bosa yachdav, even mikir tizak, that the very stones will cry out, because you'll see, the Rebbe brings the medrash, the te'ena, on Shabbos or on Shemitah will cry out if someone touches it. It will cry out, don't touch me, today is Shabbos, today is Shemitah. So in other words, Elam Haza itself, it's Shirayin Elikus. In other words, not just your body, when the Ruchnius, the Neshama will know on its own what it needs to do. You don't have to look in the Shulchan Aruch. So in a time like that, you don't need Talmud. That's why Maisa Gadol. The Rebbe brings there the dugma, the famous dugma that Rebbe brings often about a behemoth, that if you give a shemer to someone to watch an animal, so even a shemer chinam has responsibilities. If the animal does any damage or is damaged, you're responsible. What happens if the animal jumped into a fire? So it says you're not, the shemer is potter. Why? Because no normal animal jumps into a fire. And the owner didn't tell him it's a behemoth sheta, a crazy animal. So how was he supposed to know? That even an animal will not jump into fire because it knows instinctively that it's dangerous. No human being will put their hand in fire. We do this because because we don't see the fire or we don't feel the damage. We don't know it's fire. Losid Lovi, that problem won't exist. So, Maisa Gadol. Why then will we learn Torah? So he brings from Ageres HaKedesh, because Torah is a Torah, Raisa B'Kudsha B'Richu Kulachad, the Torah has other milas, to be my Yachid Yechudim, to understand deeper levels of Elokus. So this is what I told the doctors in their language. So I would suggest, if I may, you want to live Mashiach, the first thing you have to envision it somewhere in your life. So learning in Yoni Gula Mashiach, absolutely the Dvar Malchus that Rebbe gave out, that Poshet explains the Rambam, Perek Yud Aleph Yud Beis, many other sikhs, actually any sikh where the Rebbe speaks about it, like I quoted a few, Achrei and Kadeshim and Emer, the Tanya Perek Lamed Vav Lamed Zayin is a must. Without that, you really cannot understand the world of Geula. 2 full chapters that talk about it, and so many other places. And then comes, okay, now that you learned it, so give an example. Find an example in your life, and then live it. Prepare your home, your environment, and see the Aleph. Is this going to change the whole world in a second? It could. because it means you brought Gula in your terms. B'chol meidecha, meit shelcha. But it's definitely, b'derech hateva, definitely, in my opinion, something that would go into the category of tut alts, Vasir Kent. It's not alts, kemuvan, because alts is a big word, but it's something that every person can do. I spoke once for children. Remember Chavches in Nissan, I don't remember where I was in a different country, I think. They asked me to speak to little children, and I told them this. And the children came up with fascinating ideas. I said, why don't you come up and make a little exercise? And they came up with interesting things. You know, there was like this, that didn't happen there, but I remember hearing once that a teacher gave exercises to children that they should draw something. And so all the children drew, you know, this one drew a tree, a baby, whatever, a bird. And one child kept on trying to draw, and the teacher said, what are you trying to draw? So she answered, God, Hashem. Says, you think you can draw Hashem? She says, wait, I'll wait till you see. You know, I'm working on it. But, you know, children come up with interesting things. I don't know what the child would exactly draw. But the point is, you know, it could be, you know, children have their own imagination. We unfortunately don't let them always. We try to turn them into adults like us. But, you know, children, says Chassidus, that the pshittus of a child touches pshittus atzmus, you know, because they're not bound, they're not jaded by all the seichel and everything that's a mahel and behester. So I think if we open up, unleash the imagination, interesting how children would describe in their own words what the aleph is in any little thing that they're doing. And maybe we can learn from them, V'heshav Levi avos albonim. So I just wanted to just add the other side about being mamchish a bit more, talking here. Chavches Nissan, we're trying our best. I hope that Rebbe, I'm sure that Rebbe is listening, and this is the mere fact that we are, you know, small little people are trying, at least sitting here and making an attempt is also, I believe, quite valuable and precious. Kemuvan, it's not enough until we keep pushing as much as we can. But I just wanted to throw that in. And I think if each of us can bring it into somewhere into our life and share it with others and inspire others, that is definitely a part of the Maisa Echad that each of us can do, is to be Machrias, Atzmei, V'kol Elam Kulei, Kav Schus, maybe Tshuva Sola, in the Rebbe's words, in the Rambam's words that the Rebbe quoted so often. The Gula Amitis V'Ashleim, L'chaim, L'chaim. What's the story? We go all night until Mashiach comes?
I think it's at 11:30.
I'm supposed to finish now, yeah? You want to say something closing? You want to? Huh?
You could close.
Another 5 minutes. Okay, it was very good.
What?
Shukayach to you. It was great stories. I never saw that. Ufaratz to Zeh Mashiach.
What? So?
This is based on Yala Peretz Lefanenu. No, I saw you read it, yeah. Ihr seid ein bisschen gekommen als ein gut, als ein...
Kivon. That's the assumption.
I was looking. So that's the Malka Mashiach, not David Malka Mashiach. Because Achim Pesach, Memches, that I've explained why Melava Malka Shabbos is called David Malka Mashiach. So that's the Malka Mashiach. So your father Parson stayed, obviously.
Yeah, 100%.
Had this letter come a day later.
I got 5 minutes later. Not a day later. 5 minutes later.
Unbelievable. Unglaublich.
He was waiting for the taxi, and the payment came.
So why did he come Simchas Torah Mem Aleph?
I think because of a bris or something. Or a hakel. He was a hakel, whatever. That was the exception.
Hey, that's a great story. Great story. But I think the Rebbe told him after a while, so genug halten beim Hand.
The Rebbe said in the Chavches, his van will if the daf na room nemen the kind of the hand.
What year?
Pesach of this.
That's 10 years later.
I think that was after Amal passed away because the Rebbe wasn't going to send as many letters. That's my.
Aha.
Bis wenn will ich bedarfen herum in die Kinder bringen, tracht in Chabad, dass du Mechaber sein zum Kavod.
Was?
Tracht in Chabad, dass du Mechaber sein zum Kavod.
So what did your father start doing then that he didn't do till then?
What he started doing, whenever he had to go to a big meeting, the whole night he would sit with the onion papers, Yamalika Anachas. That's what he did all night. I remember, Geneki's Club.
And letters started becoming less then?
100%. Then it was talking Klolim here and there. No, but
He didn't complain. The Rebbe just said it as a... Because he would write. He constantly would write questions.
As time went on, he started writing less. So you're going to have a feast. First year, there was a kid. I have...
I think your father has a letter for every day, right?
Yeah, I almost found it.
Almost? He would read it. He'd read by events. I saw it.
Every time, whenever the Garelick is there, we read a letter from Garelick. I have
What?
I started this thing of Lechaim. There should be a letter from Garelick.
What? To read a letter.
Lechaim.
Okay. All the letters to him are mefursim, or some are...
I put a lot in the Kodesh, whatever was in it.
Is anything confidential that can be printed?
There's a few. I'm writing a book now, so I'm going to put everything.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the states of it. I'm going to be mashed with a little bit. Hein kam schon erzählen. Jammer hat mich okay.
There's that whole tkufa where they're printing the machos and the Allgemeine. Your father was heavily involved in that. L'chaim will just conclude, not conclude. The Rebbe says always make a little hefzer between one Farbrengen and the next. So we'll say like this, name myself in the name of Rabbi Levi, in the name of all of us. I mean, the most important thing is to speak to the Rebbe himself, who is surely here with us, that we will do our best, but the Rebbe should already have Rachmanis on all of us, on his children, and it's 32 years. And even if, yes, we can look at ourselves and say there's a lot more to do, no one's going to give any excuses, but still, Ka'av, Arachim al-Bonim, we still ask for Rachmanis. I mean, there's enough tzaras. And finally, as the Rebbe himself said, that everything was finished, the Rebbe said the biggest question that he had was, what Favos Taka the Gula Nishgikum? And I remember all the years the Rebbe would say, why did the Gula not come? Maybe there's still one more thing to do. Then the Rebbe did not use that language after Nun Aleph. He would say, Punk Faket. Why, if everything is ready, why is the Gula not here? Abtaka Kasha, the Gresta Kasha. So the Rebbe himself said it's a Kasha. It's always best to present to the Rebbe. You always bring rayas from the Rebbe himself. That's always best. It's not us, the Rebbe said it. So the Rebbe should definitely listening to us. So this Chof Ches Nissen should be, as Rabbi Levi said before, the last Chof Ches Nissen without the Rebbe here Begashmis, and we should be Zeich even before tonight and tomorrow, the Gula Amitis Vashlema. The Rebbe says, in the Rebbe's own words, V'hu Yigalenu L'matam Asarat Fachim, and the Rebbe. And we should then understand, as the Rebbe writes in that letter to Ben Tzvi, all the Eid Hashem Kianaf to be, all the tzaras that we went through, how we'll see how it's all really Eid Hashem, all for Gula Amitis Vashlema, and Beintayim we should only have brachas and simchas b'teva nira v'nigla, and should be no longer any tzaras by any Eden, and definitely Eretz Yisrael, Chol Malkum Shehem Eden, and the world, Sati Shalom Ba'aretz, And we should be zeichet to be together with the Rebbe. L'chaim, l'chaim. Ja, die was da von machen bracha achren, so man stammen nicht vergessen machen bracha.